channel. Today I will try to explain basically how to care for young orchid plants in a home environment. Let's start off by seeing how young orchids grow in nature and help us understand better how to care for them. For this, we take a short, quick trip to Guatemala and look into a tree searching for some young Cattleyas. This footage was taken by Alaman Tropical. On this old overgrown oak tree, we see a mix of orchids, bromeliads and some ferns. Here a large plant of Guariante aurantiaca in its typical habitat, at approximately 1500 meters above sea level. You can see how they grow naturally. They don't grow on the naked bark, but in a 1 to 2 centimeter thick cushion consisting of moss and lichen. You can clearly see where the new young roots go down into it. Further down the branch, we see a seedling and more of them along the tree. The moss and lichen are essential for the young seedlings to keep moist around the roots. The adult plants don't really need this high humidity anymore. And here we see Epidendrum lochianum, again growing in moss. Here again a Guariante. You can clearly see how the rhizome crawls on through the moss and the roots bury themselves into it. Here an Epidendrum stamfordianum. And the Prostechia, showing spikes forming and new young full-grown bulbs, again growing in this moss carpet on the bark. Here a seed pod from Guariante aurantiaca, and on another plant sheets with buds forming, all different stages of the plant in one tree at the same time. While mounting a young Cattleya sophronitis hybrid on a chunk of black lava rock, let's go over what we've seen. Well, for starters, the orchid roots are not growing on the bare bark, but in a layer of moss. Keep in mind that some species' roots do grow on plain bark, so do your research. They all grow facing the light. The tree is located in a sunny position, allowing much light on the thick branches. Wind blows swiftly through the tree, securing a good airflow. These are all things we have to keep in mind when we try growing most orchids in our home, or wherever we keep them in a closed environment. Keep in mind that there's a large group of orchids that don't grow in direct sun and prefer shadier conditions. One of the best known examples are most of the Phalaenopsis orchid species. Now, what's the main difference between adult orchids and seedlings or young plants? Because orchids belong to the prehistoric plants, having been around for millions of years, somewhere on Earth when the T-Rex roamed the Earth. They never evolved much. certainly when it comes to germination and growth of the seedlings in the early stages. To keep it simple, that's why they need to be sown in a sterile environment on a nutritious sugar-based substance called agar. I won't go into detail about this process as there is many good info about it to be found. A good video about this subject can be found on the channel Here But Not. If that interests you, you should check it out. As we saw, there's only a limited portion of the seeds that germinated and were strong enough to grow on the tree, although a seed pod can hold thousands of tiny seeds. This has to do with the germination process combined with other factors like the wind dispersing the seeds and suitable germination media, and grow on with the symbiotic elements they need to grow. In cultivation, when the seeds germinate in a closed, sterile environment, the humidity is always around 100% in there. When they are ready to come out of their little nursery, they are exposed to the elements and get infected with fungi, viruses, etc. To protect these fragile young plants, there are different methods used to help save these little ones and get them growing. This, however, is a subject to another video coming soon. Now, since the seedlings are very tiny when they come out of the flask, they need help to get their moisture and some nutrition from us. Because there are only a few tiny leaves to photosynthesize and so help nourish the small babies, first of all, we need to make sure humidity stays high and airflow is abundant around the plants, so no molds or fungi can set in and kill them. To do this, we start the tiny plants off in a grow box, a jar we can close, a mini nursery, or whatever can serve the purpose. We put them in a medium that holds some moisture, but they never may stay wet and soggy for a long time, or they will rot fast. Wherever you grow them in or place the baby pots, make sure they get light but never overexpose them to direct full sunlight or they will burn. When we get young plants in that are a bit bigger, we can skip the grow box stage since they are already accustomed, or at least they should be, to growing in a more open, airy situation. The state these plants are in when you get them all depends on how they were cared for before you got them. I would suggest only buying these young orchids from nurseries you really trust, as they need a lot of TLC after arrival. Never buy these plants from so-called internet orchid supermarkets that keep on popping up on a weekly basis or private sellers on eBay, Facebook, etc. Again, you really must trust these sellers. Okay, you bought the plants and they arrived after some days in transit, packed in a dark box and exposed to cooler, drier or warmer conditions than they were used to. These plants are in shock. Remember, we are dealing with prehistoric creatures and after acclimation and unpacking, we start caring for them softly. First of all, keep them out of the bright light, keep them at temperature, but don't overheat them, and mist or water a bit when needed. As said, these ones need your full attention and need to be checked on a regular, at least daily basis. Remember, we are talking about home growing. Now, what water to use? Well, we have several options. First of all, rainwater. Living in a crowded city, for me, that's not an option. The pollution of rainwater is high with chemicals and is very acidic. Also, when rainwater is stored the wrong way, it goes stale and chemical reactions due to unwanted particles that fall out of the sky with it may cause problems. Then we have tap water. Depending on the hardness or pH, this can be suitable for watering your orchids, but leave it for approximately 24 hours in an open container, so chlorine and other sterilizing chemicals can evaporate. We can also use reverse osmosis or distilled water. This is or should be of neutral value, with nothing left in it. So, just pure water. We will need to add additional components to feed our plants like fertilizers or other growth improvement additives. Once your plants start to establish and acclimatize to your growing environment, you can start fertilizing them with a diluted fertilizer mix of whatever you like to use. This usually is after at least a month in your care, and please, preferably, use it at 1/4 of the normal strength. However, in my experience, many of the liquid fertilizers sold in garden centers, etc., can do more harm than good and some may burn your plants and or kill them. That's my experience with over 30 years of growing and caring for orchids. Also, if you don't have the experience or knowledge yet, don't start experimenting with additional products other than the fertilizer you are used to. It can do a lot of harm, especially to your very young plants. On the subject of fertilizers, everyone has his own opinion. Please don't start changing things because you hear or see it. Only change when something goes really wrong. If you're not familiar with fertilizers, I would recommend the standard MSU Orchid Fertilizer. It was created by the Michigan State University. If you're in Europe and can't find it, my preferred fertilizer, Acaron's Rain Mix, an optimized fertilizer based on the MSU formula, would be my primary choice. Both fertilizers come in a granulated or powdered form and are completely water soluble. If used correctly, they certainly won't harm your plants or burn them. On the subject of media to use, well, everyone has his favorite. It can be organic, like a bark mix or sphagnum moss, or inorganic, like growstone, etc. What you use is not important. And don't change your growing media or method because someone else does it differently. Only if and only if you keep on failing, change something in your growing pattern, it being a care change or a different media. Never start changing things over and over again, because you see different things on YouTube or else on the internet. That way is a sure path to failure. What is important is to use sterile and sharp equipment, like your shears. Remove all dead roots and other plant parts before you repot your tiny babies and disinfect your equipment between plants, even when they come out of the same pot. Also put some cinnamon powder on large cuts to dry and disinfect the wound. But never put cinnamon on the roots as it dries them out and kills them. Growing orchids in home is not always easy or the best way, but we grow where and how we can. Keep in mind that orchids that are stressed by being moved from one place to another can take 1, 2 or more years to adjust to your growing conditions, even when you buy flowering size plants or so-called adult plants. This certainly is the case with some Cattleya species and even Phalaenopsis species. To end, I would like to say, if you start off growing orchids, I recommend you try hybrids, bought from a reputable source and not from the supermarket. Through selection and breeding, these plants are way hardier most of the time than most species. Thanks for watching. If I forgot something, please drop me a note below and I'll reply as soon as possible. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and possibly subscribe to my channel. It's free and you will be notified when new videos are uploaded. Until next time.